Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Retro Channel. Today we're going to have another look at the Game Gear. There's a switchless region mod that I've come up with that I've been trying out. There's a little power LED upgrade, and I've also been comparing some more sound samples between the BennVenn and the McWill screens. So let's check it out. Now, keen-eyed viewers may have noticed in the last video where I installed the BennVenn screen that this Game Gear is actually a Japanese version, and that's probably why it doesn't have that spot for the ferrite bead, because the board is slightly different, although it's still very similar to the European VA0 version. The biggest difference though is the region. Now, because Game Gear and Master System games are not region locked as such, it doesn't make that much of a difference, but there are some games that will detect if it's running on a Japanese system and give you Japanese font and text, and sometimes you'll have a different startup screen. Some games are even named differently depending on what region the system is. So rather than cutting a hole somewhere and installing a switch, I thought there must be a better way of doing it that doesn't involve any case mutilation. So what I've done, I looked up the pinout for the is it the SDA chip, I believe it's called. It is labeled IC3 in the twin ASIC versions, and the pin that we're looking for in particular is pin 24, which is the 7th pin up on the left hand side from the bottom. And depending on whether that pin is grounded or connected to 5 volts will tell the games that you're actually running whether you've got a Japanese system or not. Now this particular one is just, well, this particular one was just connected to ground, but I've actually lifted that pin, soldered a wire to it, and connected it to the bottom side of C26. C26 sits between the left button on the D-pad and ground. So normally when you don't have left being pressed on the D-pad, the bottom of C26 has 5 volts on it, and when you actually push left, it brings that to ground. So a low signal at pin 24 will indicate that it's a Japanese system. A high signal indicates that it's a global version. Let's have a look at what it does in action. So if I power this on, and it would help if I actually put a cartridge in here, or would it? There we go. So looking at the Master System test suite, we can now see that it identifies the region as USA/Brazil. And if I do the same thing again, but hold left as we start this up, it identifies the region as Japan, Korea. So we can tell that the switch is definitely working. There are some oddities. Let's have a look at some other Master System games first. We'll just fire up, say, Aleste. So nothing special there. If we fire it up while holding left, we get the little Sega Mark III splash screen, because this game was designed with the Sega Mark III in mind in Japan, whereas the rest of the world got the Master System and later on the Game Gear. And you'll also notice games like Wonder Boy 3, which starts up normally there, but if we switch to Japan region, it's Monster World 2. Now, that's a big one if you're trying to get FM sound, because I think it's only if the console is in the Japanese region that it will enable FM sound on Wonder Boy 3. But seeing as this is a Game Gear, I don't plan on doing any FM sound mods to it, although I believe somebody has done it, so it is potentially possible. But yeah, I don't know if it's worth it to FM sound mod a Game Gear unless you're going to try and consolize it. But yeah, I don't have any immediate plans to do that. Now, looking at some Game Gear examples, one that comes to mind is this one right here, which for the rest of the world is called Power Strike 2, but starting this game up in Japanese mode, it's now called GGLS 2. I don't know if there's any major differences in the actual gameplay. I did find a little list online, so I'll link that in the description down below if you're interested in certain games that have various differences. The main one that I wanted to point out is, where is it? Pop Breaker. Now this particular game will not work unless you've got a Japanese console, or at least one that identifies itself as a Japanese console. What's interesting is we can just hit left, and now that when I hit start, it lets us in. So it's actually only checking that region flag at that particular start screen. So if we had a permanent switch, then we'd just switch it over to Japan and wouldn't worry about it. But you can see that I can hit start all I want here, but as soon as I hit left and start, it actually begins working. So it's only identifying as a Japanese console when I'm pressing left, and that seems to be the only time that we actually need to do that in order to play the game. So it is kind of handy for that kind of thing. I think if you've got a European or US version Game Gear, it's probably not as useful mod, but if you've got a Japanese Game Gear, it's something I'd probably recommend trying out. I mean, I don't know if it's going to affect any games yet. I've played around with it for a few hours on different games and haven't had any issues, but keep in mind that every time we hit left, we're changing our console region to Japan, even in games. But like I said, haven't had any issues so far. Now, you could also do this on a single ASIC board. I don't actually have a working example at the moment. I do have this board, which is in terrible condition. There's corrosion. I dare say all these traces have been eaten away. Yeah, all kinds of mess. Somebody went to the trouble of trying to recap it, although even their cap job is pretty rubbish. I have no idea why you'd bother trying to recap this without dealing with all these clearly broken traces everywhere. Anyway, this is a single ASIC board, and I believe it's pin 142 on this, which determines the region. So it's the third pin on the top row from the left. So if you were to lift that pin, and again you could connect it to the left on the D-pad, you'd want to connect it to the bottom of C34 if you want to have that region switching enabled. Now I might actually attempt to get this working. It could be an interesting little project. So yeah, I guess let me know if you're interested, if you want to see me attempt to bring this back to life. But it is another one that's made in Japan, so no doubt I'll be trying out that region mod if I can get it running. Either way, leave me a comment if you want to see a repair on this, or if you've tried this little switch-free region mod. Yeah, I'd be interested to hear how it worked out for you. Now, enough about regions. The other little mod that I did was just replacing the LED, because the original bright red one is just painful. Especially if you're in a dim room and you've got the screen brightness turned down, you've still got this really bright red LED right in your face. So I swapped it out for a 3mm blue one, which the camera, there we go, it's focused on that. I put a little 3mm blue one in. I did also have to swap R11, which is the resistor just next to it. I think there was a 470 ohm, and that made the blue LED incredibly retina burning bright. And I changed that out to a 10K resistor. But it is a little surface mount jobby, so keep that in mind. But yeah, I like the look of the blue. I think the blue looks more modern and It's nowhere near as bright as that red one was. You could just change that resistor and keep the red one in there if you just want to lower the brightness. Finally, the last thing I want to look at, and again I will be comparing the BennVenn screen with the McWill screen, is the actual noise levels. Now in the last video I compared the noise levels when there was no sound being played, and there was a very obvious difference between the BennVenn and the McWill, with the McWill causing a lot more noise interference. Now, to make this fair, I actually disabled the brightness mod that I did on the McWill screen because it is, I think, version 2.1, which didn't come out with a thing where you could adjust the brightness. So there is a mod that enables you to do that, but it does seem to introduce a bit more noise into the audio. So I disabled that for this test, and then I also went back and re-enabled it, did a bunch of tests comparing both, and I will play them soon. I'll also put up some images in Audacity so you can see the waveform and also the spectrogram view, or the spectral view. So yeah, I'll bring them up on the screen in a moment and play some samples, but you will notice that all of the samples have a noise band around 8 kilohertz, and I think there's another alias of that at 16 kilohertz. So I guess that's just inherent to the Game Gear, but yeah, there is definitely a massive difference even in its stock form between the McWill and the BennVenn. Now I did pay full price for both these screens. There was no special deals going on here, and it's kind of disappointing because I'm realizing just how crummy the McWill screen is. I don't know if it's better with version 3, but yeah, definitely version 2 really is starting to suck, basically. So it's a bit disappointing because, like a lot of people, I did pay good money for it. But that's what happens. Something better comes along and, you know, replaces the thing that used to be king. Right, so I'll just play through the intro of Sonic on the Game Gear version and you can hear the difference between both. It is quite loud, so if you've already got your headphones or your speakers turned up, maybe turn them down just a tiny bit for this next couple of minutes. So yeah, there you go. There is quite a difference there. Now you're probably thinking, well, the Game Gear's only got a tiny, crappy little speaker. Would you really hear it when you're playing on the actual Game Gear itself? And the answer is yes, most definitely. The interference that the McWill screen creates is pretty much, it's constantly there. There's a constant buzz, and that has a detrimental effect on the rest of the frequency range. So for anyone interested, all those samples were done obviously in Audacity. I was using a laptop that was not plugged into the mains power, and the Game Gears were also running on batteries. And I was using a Behringer UCA 222 to capture that audio from 3.5 to USB. So that's how those tests were performed. Anyway, let me know what you think. Does the noise from the McWill screen bother you? Is it enough to make you go for the BennVenn? Is just the screen alone enough to make you go for it? Have you already bought one? Let me know. So that's about it for today. I hope you enjoyed this one, and a big thanks to my patrons as always. If you want to get ad-free early access to these videos, I'll leave a link to the Patreon page down below. And as always, thank you all for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. See ya. Bye.